You remember being 8 years old and your parents told you to be home when the streetlights came on? That was it. That was the entire safety briefing. No cell phone to check in, no GPS tracking your location, no scheduled playdate with another parent hovering 3 feet away. You just left the house after breakfast and came back when you got hungry or when the sky started going dark. And somehow, you survived. If you were a kid in the 1970s or 1980s, you lived in what researchers now call the free-range childhood. You walked to school alone at age 6. You rode your bike across town without telling anyone where you were going. You climbed trees that were definitely too high, played in construction sites that were definitely off limits, and solved problems with other kids that no adult ever heard about. What psychologists are discovering is that this wasn't just a different style of parenting. It created a fundamentally different psychology. And the gap between how you were raised and how kids grow up today isn't just about safety or supervision. It's about whether children ever get the chance to build the internal architecture that makes an adult capable of functioning without constant external support. Let's start with what that world actually looked like. It's 1978. You're 7 years old. Saturday morning, you wake up, eat whatever cereal you can reach, and you're out the door. Your mom doesn't ask where you're going. You don't have an answer anyway. Maybe you'll end up at the creek. Maybe you'll knock on Tommy's door and see if he can come out. Maybe you'll just wander until something interesting happens. The plan forms as you move through it. Hours pass. You're blocks from home, maybe farther. You haven't checked in because there's no way to check in. Your parents have no idea where you are, and that's not neglect. That's just Tuesday. According to research on childhood independence, kids in the 1970s had an average roaming radius of several miles from home. Today, that radius has shrunk to a few hundred feet. A 2020 study tracking childhood autonomy found that the average age a child is first allowed to play unsupervised in a front yard is now 10 years old. In 1970, that same level of independence happened at age 5 or 6. But here's what makes this shift psychologically significant. You weren't just outside more, you were outside alone, making decisions that actually mattered, facing consequences that were real. You and your friends built a fort in the woods behind the neighborhood. No adults designed it. No one approved the plan or checked if it met safety standards. You figured out how to balance boards between trees. You learned which branches would hold weight and which ones wouldn't by testing them. Sometimes you fell. You adjusted. One kid showed up with nails he took from his dad's garage. Another brought a hammer. You built something that was structurally questionable and completely yours. When it rained and part of it collapsed, you rebuilt it, not because a parent told you how, but because you wanted the fort to exist more than you wanted to give up. That process, repeated hundreds of times across different contexts, built something specific in your brain. Psychologists call it internal locus of control. The belief that outcomes in your life are primarily determined by your own actions rather than external forces or other people. It's not confidence. It's deeper than that. It's the fundamental assumption that you are the agent in your own life, that your decisions matter, that you can affect what happens next. Research published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology tracked locus of control across generations. The data showed a clear pattern. Each generation since the 1960s has shown progressively lower internal locus of control and higher external locus of control compared to the one before it. Translation: people increasingly believe that what happens to them is determined by forces outside themselves rather than by their own choices and capabilities. And the shift correlates directly with the decline in childhood independence. But there's another dimension to this that goes beyond just independence. You didn't just have freedom, you had boredom. Long, unstructured, excruciating stretches of absolutely nothing to do. No screens to check, no content to consume, no algorithm serving up the next thing. You sat on your front steps and stared at the street. You lay on your back in the grass and watched clouds. You felt the specific discomfort of time passing slowly with no external stimulation to fill it. And then, because you couldn't stand it anymore, you created something. Not because you were particularly creative, but because your brain will do almost anything to escape prolonged boredom. You invented games with rules that made no sense. You turned cardboard boxes into spaceships. You spent an hour trying to teach yourself to juggle with tennis balls and failed, but kept trying anyway, because what else were you going to do? Boredom wasn't a problem to solve. It was the condition that forced your brain to generate its own entertainment. And that capacity, the ability to sit with emptiness and produce something from it, that's becoming extinct. Developmental psychologists studying creativity have found something striking. Children who experience regular, unstructured boredom show significantly higher creative problem-solving abilities than children whose time is constantly filled with structured activities or digital stimulation. The brain needs blank space to learn how to fill itself. Without it, you don't develop the neural pathways that generate ideas independently. You become dependent on external sources to tell you what to think about next. Here's where the economic dimension enters the picture. You graduated into a workplace that didn't particularly care about your feelings. There was no discussion about work-life balance. You didn't negotiate remote Fridays or ask about mental health days. You showed up, did what was required, and figured out how to make it work because that's what everyone did. Not because it was ideal, because there wasn't another option. The data on workplace expectations shows this clearly. Workers entering the labor force in the 1970s and 80s reported significantly lower expectations for employer flexibility compared to workers entering in the 2000s and beyond. You didn't expect your job to fulfill you emotionally. It was a transaction. You traded time and effort for money. If you wanted fulfillment, you found it somewhere else. That's not a value judgment. It's an observation about what shaped your psychology. You learned early that satisfaction doesn't come from external validation or perfect conditions. It comes from your own capacity to adapt, to make the best of what's in front of you, to find meaning in circumstances that weren't designed for your comfort. And then there's the technology piece. You adopted it, obviously. You learned computers, navigated the internet, figured out smartphones when they arrived. But you came to all of it as an adult with an already formed identity. The technology didn't raise you. You decided how much of it to let in. Younger generations don't have that boundary. They grew up inside the technology. Their sense of self formed in relationship to it. Approval came through likes. Social status was quantified in followers. Identity became performance. But you remember what it felt like to exist without an audience. You know the difference between connection and performance because you experienced both as distinct states. Research on digital natives versus digital immigrants confirms this split. People who adopted technology after childhood retain a psychological separation from it that people raised with it never develop. You can put your phone down and feel whole. You remember life before constant connectivity, which means you know it's possible to be happy without it. The generation that raised itself after school, that built forts without supervision, that learned to tolerate boredom until creativity emerged, that entered a workforce with zero expectation of accommodation, you didn't get participation trophies. You got consequences, real ones. You fell out of trees and learned trees were dangerous. You got in fights and learned some people won't like you no matter what you do. You failed at things with no adults rushing in to soften the blow or explain it wasn't really your fault. And all of that, the independence, the boredom, the lack of cushioning, it built adults who don't look to external forces to fix what's broken. You assume if something needs handling, you'll figure it out. Not because you're tougher or better, because that's the psychology your childhood constructed. You're not nostalgia-driven. You're not cynical. You're not waiting for the world to accommodate you. You're the generation that learned how to build your own fort, entertain yourself with nothing, and show up whether or not anyone's watching. That's not a story people tell about Gen X. It's just what happened when you grew up the way you did. And it made you exactly who you are. You're not better than the generations that came after. You're different because of timing. You had something they didn't get, the chance to fail without documentation, to be bored until you fixed it yourself, to learn that you could survive without anyone watching. That shaped a psychology that doesn't wait for permission or perfect conditions. You already know how to function when no one's coming to help. The world moved on. Kids don't roam anymore. Boredom gets medicated with screens. Independence gets replaced with supervision. And maybe some of that makes sense, but what got lost in the transition was the chance to build a self that doesn't need constant external support to keep functioning. You carry something rare, the knowledge that you can handle what comes next because you've been handling things since you were 6 years old, standing at a crosswalk with no adult in sight, deciding for yourself when it was safe to cross,